just play our brand of football. Everybody got me?
It's Singleton opening 10-5, touchdown, Penn State.
They now on 3rd and long, Hauser over the middle, it's picked off. Jalen Reed gets underneath it.
It's a Penn State touchdown.
A lot of excitement surrounding Penn State this year, so we welcome in our friend Tyler Donohue of Lions 24/7. Tyler, a lot of changes to the college football landscape in general this year, and let's be real, some that really benefit Penn State, right? You don't have divisions anymore in the Big Ten, which means no more playing Ohio State and Michigan every single year, and also an expanded playoff, so more room for people to party. But with all that fun, how much extra pressure does that potentially put on a coach like James Franklin?
I think it legitimately puts a lot more pressure on him because a lot of the built-in excuses that you could understand and kind of rationalize, they are now out the door. Now there's 12 teams invited to this thing. Penn State's kind of been the poster child for one of those programs that's been perennially left on the doorstep. A lot of New Year's 6 bowl games, 11-win seasons, but no playoff appearances. And big part of that reason is they have shared the East Division with Michigan and Ohio State. They haven't beaten the Buckeyes since 2016 when they won the Big Ten last. They haven't beaten Michigan since 2020. So naturally, to get rid of one of those teams on your schedule would seem like a footstep in the right direction. A matchup against Washington at one point looked a lot more dicey than it does now because that program has gone through some changes. They've got a road trip to Southern Cal to bring in that Pac-12 flair. So there are some interesting dynamics here. West Virginia is kind of a sneaky opener on the road, and then a tricky trip to Wisconsin later on in the season. So there's opportunity for pitfalls, but there's a good chance where you can bounce back from 2 losses. For so long now, it's felt like James Franklin's been walking on eggshells. Once you get that first loss, you can't lose again, or you got no shot to get to Indianapolis in the Big Ten championship game. Now, you can probably afford to lose 2 losses along the way and find yourself right there in the mix to play in the postseason.
And pressure really is relative, but we can both assume, too, there might be a little bit on a guy like Drew Allar as he enters his 2nd year as the starter. What are the let's go with realistic expectations for him in year 2 under center?
Well, you'd think a big step forward with the offensive coordinator change. James Franklin did this for a reason, and part of it is to give the best opportunity for this former 5-star recruit to flourish in his 3rd year on campus. Andy Kotelnicki was recognized by 24/7 Sports as Offensive Coordinator of the Year for what he did at Kansas last season. Enter that into the equation where he just saw his fired offensive coordinator before Thanksgiving. I mean, no one saw that coming when they got off to a strong start last year. Drew Allar threw for 325 yards in the season opener. Big performance in a win over West Virginia. He didn't reach 240 passing yards, go over that mark again until after Thanksgiving. Kind of hard to believe, but that's how kind of uninspiring the offensive attack was through the air during the year, and that's a big part of the reason why Mike Yurcich lost his job. He had a 25-2 touchdown to interception ratio, which you'll take 10 times out of 10 for any freshman, or any first-year starter, I should say. But during that sophomore campaign, failed to complete 50% of his passes in 5 different games. 3 of them happened in losses. And you can look at a lot of different reasons, but when you're the former number 1 quarterback in the country at 24/7 Sports and you're stepping up to the plate expected to elevate an offense that Sean Clifford had led for the last 4 years, and that doesn't happen, people are expecting a big jump in year 3, and Kotelnicki's a big part of that equation as well.
Speaking of recruiting and recruiting rankings, it certainly helps Penn State's recruiting pitch to say, hey, look, we had 2 guys drafted in the 1st round this past year, an offensive tackle, Olu Fashanu, and the defensive end, Chop Robinson. Unfortunately, though, that means for the current Penn State Nittany Lions, they don't have them. So who steps up to replace those 2 guys?
Yeah, well, look, Olu's going to be a hard spot for anyone to fill. An All-American, 2-time All-Big Ten player, a Player of the Year kind of candidate. But they got guys who have experience in Drew Shelton. He stepped up for Olu Fashanu back in the 2022 season. Started the last 5 games when Fashanu was sidelined. That included a Rose Bowl victory. He played 300-plus snaps last year as the primary backup on both sides of the offensive tackle equation. So he's in play, but he missed spring practice. He was sidelined for undisclosed reasons, recovered recovering from an offseason procedure. And that opened the door for Javen Williams, a former 5-star prospect, to get a lot of work at left tackle. He started the spring game with the first team unit. He's a guy that has a lot of the physical intangibles you look for, but unlike Shelton, we just haven't gotten a look at him in Power 4 action. And then on the right side, Anthony Donka was a late bloomer last year. He focused on guard for much of his first year on campus, but in place of Caden Wallace in the second half of the Peach Bowl, really impressed, and that was his first game, high school level or college level, playing the offensive tackle position. His momentum has carried through spring ball. We're all curious to see what it means for the summer, but he also faces competition. Nolan Rucci came in by way of transfer. He's a former 5-star Pennsylvania high school product. Nittany Lions legacy, who opted to go to Wisconsin to begin his college football career. Didn't see a lot of action, but he got some work in their bowl game last year. Seemed to give him some confidence. So him and Anthony Donka are two to watch in the right tackle spot. I think Phil Troutwine, the offensive line coach, has the pieces. And then at defensive end, you actually got a plethora of options that they're really excited about. Even with losing Chop Robinson and then the third-round pick, Adisa Isaac, who went to the Baltimore Ravens, you've got a freshman All-American who turned into the first-team All-Big Ten linebacker last year, and Abdul Carter now making his move as an edge rusher. And everyone's excited for this. We didn't get to see Micah Parsons play a junior season because of what happened in 2020. He was one of the many stars who opted out of a strange season that we weren't sure was going to actually happen. But Carter, we do get year 3. We get to see that process of him growing up. And unlike Parsons, they've already unleashed him a bit as an edge rusher. He broke through with 6.5 sacks as a freshman, and he followed that up last year with a really strong November. It wasn't really the start to finish dominance that we expected to see from him as a sophomore, but I think the stage is set now by the way he finished last season, and now what we've seen in some flashes during spring ball and what we've heard from feedback, he's ready to maybe rise up as the next first-round pick at the defensive end spot for them. And Denai Dennis Sutton could join him in round 1. You look at some of those early 2025 mock drafts, the former 5-star is in the thick of those things, and so he's a big presence at defensive end. And then a veteran named Amin Vanover, year 5 for him, but he is ready to roll. He had a big performance in the spring game. One other name I'll throw your way because he could be that next man up, maybe the future first-round prospect to follow. Jameel Lyons, by way of Philadelphia, turned a lot of heads on the practice field during his freshman year, showed us some things in the postseason. He might be ready to rumble as a complementary piece off the edge.
Sounds like a lot of great options there. I asked you about 2 guys leaving. How about 2 guys coming in? Julian Fleming and A.J. Harris. What have you seen from those 2 transfers early on in the spring?
Yeah, they're about their business. That's kind of the verdict that we got early on about both of these guys. They're at different phases of their career. Julian Fleming, a former #1 overall receiver at 24/7 Sports when he came out of the high school level, coming out of Pennsylvania. There were some hard feelings among Penn State fans that he wasn't wearing a Nittany Lions uniform for the last 4 years. He went off to Columbus. He ended up being a starter for Ohio State. He started 20 of the last 23 games there in Columbus, but he shared the room with a bunch of first-round picks, Heisman Trophy contenders, and he admitted to us, he learned a lot about himself. It was a humbling experience, and unfortunately for him, although he played a bunch with the Buckeyes, he was never healthy. He has said this is the healthiest he has been since high school. Surgeries are now past him, and he hopes to really deliver. He took advantage of that COVID eligibility, came back home. He's going to have family and friends supporting him, and there's a lot of excitement about the leadership he has already brought to the receiver room. This is a receiver room that, we'll get to it in a bit, there's a lot of question marks about it. He's maybe stabilized things a bit because of his background. And then A.J. Harris, again, a former 5-star, so the pedigree is there in terms of the prospect profile. But he came into Georgia's situation last year as kind of one of their big newcomers, defending national champions for the Bulldogs. So anytime you're talking about one of their hotshot freshmen, you want to focus on that guy. And he played a bit, but was kind of shut down in terms of the cornerback competition as the season progressed, and ultimately hit the transfer portal, looked for greener pastures, and Penn State quickly made a move. I think one thing they were impressed by when the staff got on the phone early with A.J. Harris was how much he knew already about what Penn State wants to accomplish schematically. He did his homework, and that kind of was a really good first step. He came into campus, and not only was he prepared like a professional, although he's only a sophomore, but he also lit it up in the blue-white game. He was probably the most impressive defensive player in terms of what they were able to do from start to finish in that spring game. And he was playing kind of on the JV unit. A lot of the transfers were over there. So he didn't actually have the arsenal of a great supporting cast, and he really stood out. So I think there's a lot of excitement brewing about him and Julian Fleming, both sides of the ball. And they're going to need someone to step up at cornerback. They lose about 1,500 snaps from their departed top 3 cornerbacks on last year's squad.
You mentioned wanting to talk about the wide receiver room. You're not the only one. This feels like a storyline we've been talking about for a while with Penn State. I got to ask you, how much are we going to continue this discussion as it leads in to the 2024 season?
I host a podcast twice a week during the offseason, and we pretty much hit on it each episode, it feels like, because it looms so large in Drew Allar's development and what Andy Kotelnicki is going to be able to accomplish as the offensive coordinator here. And even with Fleming in the equation, someone who's played a bunch, they still don't have a receiver who has 1,000 career receiving yards. You thought you had one coming out of spring ball or going into spring ball with Keandre Lambert-Smith. We were all kind of surprised that he was with Penn State for year 5. He used his COVID eligibility, but he entered the transfer portal after spring ball by the end of spring ball, and he's at Auburn now. So he's done. And Julian Fleming, he's got to be healthy. That's a bit of an if, and you kind of apply that to Harrison Wallace too. We were hearing things about Harrison Wallace coming out of preseason camp last year that he was going to be the #1 target, even with Keandre Lambert-Smith on campus. He ended up being nicked up in September, ended up being nicked up later, but he led the team in receptions with 7 of them in the 2023 season opener. He then led the team in receptions, reached the end zone in the Peach Bowl. So him and Drew Allar do have some chemistry going. Can he be healthy? That's the key for both Harrison Wallace and Julian Fleming. And just some younger names to know. You got Caden Saunders. He's going to do some damage out of the slot, former top 100 recruit. Hasn't really done much in the production department in the last couple of weeks, couple of years on campus. And then Sean Clifford, former quarterback, his younger brother has kind of blossomed as a versatile component of this receiver group. Liam Clifford, he's a 4th-year player. So they need guys to step up. Marcus Hagans is in his 2nd year as receivers coach here. He's got some transfer flavor in there. They've got a lot of homegrown talent. If they don't get answers there, that is going to be the hot topic of this season for Penn State.
Thank you, Tyler. You can check out Lions 24/7 for all things Penn State, from upcoming visit weekends to just getting you ready for the season. The crew at Lions 24/7 has you covered.